Saudi's always been open, first of all, to engagement in business, but just what it looks like today is much different. There's
Hmm.
so many new sectors, whether it's tourism, whether it's advancing AI and technology as of the future.
Hello and welcome to the Mayman Show, and we are coming to you from our studios in Riyadh, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And today we have a American, or should I say Arab American, businesswoman coming to us in the Kingdom. We have Sarah Elzeini. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for being on the show.
It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. I mean, it's a good coincidence that you're here in Saudi and we're getting a chance to talk to you.
Exactly. No, it's an honor, and I'm so excited to be in the kingdom. And this is my last day here, so it's also a great wrap up for me.
All right. Well, thanks for being here. First of all, since it's your last day, and I'm sure of course, the downfall of knowing someone like me is I ruin your last day and tell you to come to my studios.
No,
when
I'm
we start
so
recording an
happy.
episode, right?
No, it's good.
All right. So, why don't you basically tell our audience a little bit about what you do?
Okay, so I am CEO of SMZ International Group, which is my company. We facilitate partnerships and new opportunities, whether that's in the space of business, and the business usually revolves around profitable business, but in the space of social impact. And that's one of the reasons why I'm in the kingdom this week. There's several companies I'm looking forward to bringing to the kingdom. So I've been between Jeddah and Riyadh.
Mm-hmm.
And also there's one company that I'm part of, which is really exciting. It's a tourism tech company. It's the world's first social city guide, which is the world's first social media for tourism.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're here just kind of seeing the market opportunity and how we can engage with the kingdom and the meetings. We've been having meetings with the Ministry of Tourism, venture capitalists, some others in the private sector. And so it's been exciting. And then aside from that, I do public affairs. So the work that I do is I usually create a vehicle, whether that's a foundation or a program, that's often an initiative or a vision. And I kind of make that in a physical state in Washington, D.C., because it's the intersection of not just U.S. Domestically and culturally, but it's the world's capital in a sense too. So you have a lot of countries engaging there, and so it's very important for foreign countries to engage there. And I do a lot of work mainly with the Middle East and with a focus on Saudi. But yeah, so I'm in the space of business, and then just my passion is being in public affairs and kind of helping live out those initiatives and dreams that's coming from the region here, which I feel really connected to.
Okay. So would you say, from an international businesswoman's perspective, an Arab American, like, how exciting is it, for potential opportunities of ventures between basically, organizations around the world and Saudi with Vision 2030?
I mean, it's incredibly exciting. This is the first time. I mean, Saudi's always been open, first of all, to engagement in business, but just what it looks like today is much different. There's so many new sectors, whether it's tourism, whether it's advancing AI and technology as of the future, and also in sustainability now. The Saudi Green Initiative is a huge attraction for the international community, and in particular the U.S., whether that's in terms of intergovernmental agencies like the UN, and just U.S. government in general. But moreover, there's a lot of engagement around universities in research, doing work, and trying to also it's the game kind of changed when Saudi opened up and have been investing so much in tech and sustainability, and that now we're leaning into their knowledge and their and their meaning Saudi's knowledge, talent, and their stories, and sharing that. So now it feels like a really robust bilateral relationship, government, institutionally, university, and people to people. So
people to people
Exactly.
entrepreneurs. It seems to
Exactly.
me like there's a whole ecosystem where everybody's coming together,
Mm-hmm.
just to see how they can have an added value and basically elevate, how business is being done here in general, right?
Exactly. Oh, I agree completely. And yeah, it's particularly exciting, I think, for the entrepreneur
Hmm.
because it's kind of like an archaeologist, a new site, to dig up and discover treasures. In a way, entrepreneurs are looking for new spaces to kind of breathe out their ideas.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of interest, I think, coming from Silicon Valley. Several of the companies that I'm trying to bring here. Some of them are startups in the AI and tech space.
Hmm.
And they're sometimes, they're creating these phenomenal ideas. And actually, the market isn't US. It's not fit for US. It's even better for Saudi and
Okay.
the MENAT region. So,
Well,
Saudi just being open and the largest market has been.
so why would you say it's a better fit for Saudi? Is it the basically like is it the model, or is it basically there's more more of an open opportunity for innovative
Mhm.
solutions here, or like what
Yeah,
would it be?
I think first thing is that it's an untapped market
Hmm.
that hasn't been engaged before. The leadership, it's not just in its vision or in thought, is promoting entrepreneurship and innovation. They really are changing rules and regulations, not just for the local, but for the international
Business community, yeah.
business community as well. So that's very helpful. And then just in terms of, Saudi is unique from the US or Europe in terms of this is a very community based society. So, for
Yeah.
example, the app that I'm bringing is a social media, it's between social media and tourism.
Hmm.
And so it's actually growing really fast in places like South America, where it's more community based, not an independent kind of lifestyle that's
Okay.
in the US. And so there's some ideas and concepts that really relate well to societies that are more community based. And so there's applications that maybe don't have such a fit in the US, but they can come here and it's with amazing brains behind it, people from Stanford, Harvard, everything.
So
And
how do you
yeah.
believe this this innovation would complement the developing tourism file in Saudi?
The particular one that
Yeah,
I'm representing.
the one you're representing, your current
So,
project. Yeah.
so what this one does, it's exciting. It's called Must,
Okay.
and so I'm actually spearheading all of the engagement in the Middle East for them. And I
Okay.
chose to start with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia because one being the largest market, but also your investment in tourism.
Hmm.
And what we're trying to do is digitalize the tourism space. And so this app does that. At the same time, it fits in with Vision 2030's goal of igniting the local economy.
All right.
And so usually, when you think of tourism, you think of bringing international companies in. It's just catering to something other than the local.
Okay.
But what this app does, it allows locals to have the opportunity to participate in the tourism economy.
Interesting.
And so the app is kind of like a mixture between Instagram. It has a social component with influencers and content creators, and then has the features of like booking.com and TripAdvisor. So you can
Uh-huh.
book everything on there at the same time. And so there's an element of that. So government can only has so much bandwidth of how many people they can plug in because
Okay.
it's one institution and there's so many people interested in engaging in the space. And so locals, they can, whether they have a restaurant or whether they have an idea or an activity,
Hmm.
something authentic culture experience, whether that's setting up a dinner tent in the desert or any program, they can have this experience uploaded onto the app and people can book directly. So it's a very interactive app. It's but at the same time it benefits the local economy as well. And yeah, it's really exciting. I mean, right now, for example, if I want to book at Cipriani or honestly many places here, you can't do it right now on an app or on the website. You have to
Yeah.
call.
All
And
right.
so a lot of travelers whether they don't have a local number or not. It just makes everything easier and the
Okay.
traveler experience
All right.
much better. So yeah, it's very exciting.
And someone who knows Saudi, and you've seen different parts of Saudi. So from an Arab American's perspective
Mhm.
and perception, what do you think, this country has to offer for tourism and
Mhm.
culture to the outside world?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, in terms of tourism, I think it's pretty clear what sets it different from other Middle Eastern countries is that how diverse it is inside its own country.
Hmm.
In some ways, you could even compare it to the United States. I mean,
Yeah.
there's different regions in the U.S. where, like, on the East Coast, like New York or DC, you won't have that beautiful mountainous area,
Yeah.
but you'll have that in Utah or Arizona, the
Or
Grand
Portland,
Canyon.
Oregon.
Exactly, or Portland. But and so Riyadh, it's more of a desert city. Jeddah is a port city, but you have Abha, you have all of these new regions that are starting to develop in that space.
Hmm.
And so that's interesting for the tourist because it's a new experience. And that tourist doesn't have to be someone who's in the US flying just to come to Saudi. It could be like a businessman in the region who just now has this new place to go instead of doing the typical things, the typical tour in the Gulf, which is maybe just art museums, skydiving in Dubai, which is all great, but now there's a new place to go. And
Yeah.
as the Gulf in general becomes so cosmopolitan, you just offer this new whole country and destination experience.
Hmm.
Which is exciting. And then in terms of culture, the Saudi culture is really exciting. And I think how open everyone is and the people with receiving internationals and travelers is very warm, and it's a
Okay.
warm culture. I think the hospitality
Hmm.
in Saudi is similar to kind of Southern hospitality.
Yeah.
Very much so. It's kind of putting the guest first before you and having the guest sit at the table,
Hmm.
um, having the guest take your room while you sleep on the couch. It's kind of, this is how I think Muslims and Arabs in general operate that, and it's no different than for Saudi. And I think the West sometimes might perceive, based on kind of the news in the past 20 years, that maybe Saudis are just to themselves. There's so much unknown, so
Yeah.
people just don't know what to expect. But I think when people come here, they'll be surprised,
Okay.
pleasantly surprised at the warm hospitality that always has existed.
You do a lot of work in public affairs,
Yes.
and you spend a lot of times on efforts to bridge gaps for U.S. and Saudi in
Mhm.
terms of public affairs.
Yes.
So, what can you give us a little bit about, like, basically why you do that and what
Yeah.
do you do? Like,
Okay.
yeah.
So right now I'm working on a couple of projects in the U.S.
Hmm.
And so one of them is related to the Saudi Green Initiative, and
Okay.
it was kind of self-started, but it's been supported, and it's to find kind of a program with a U.S. university or an institution to give Saudi Green Initiative a space to breathe out in, outside of on a forum or in a roundtable, and to have research, interaction, exchange around that program. And so, what I do in the space of public affairs is it's a little bit less on the communication side of things. It's more building
Yeah.
what that vehicle is. So I'm basically building the new car for whatever initiative, whatever dream or vision is
Hmm.
to drive around in the US, starting from Washington, D.C.
Okay.
So my interest in doing that now with Saudi, I've done it with several other countries in the past, but now that Saudi has opened up, it's
Hmm.
extremely exciting to me because my roots go back to there in the most recent history.
Okay.
And so it's just the perfect opportunity to engage in someone. So I'm someone who believes very strongly that we should honor every part of ourselves
Okay.
and also be loyal to all of those elements. And Saudi has played a huge role in my story and my family's role. And I couldn't get to where I am, neither have my family, without the kingdom itself in whatever year that was. And so everything that drives me in the public affairs space is something that
Okay.
deeply connects with me emotionally.
Mhm.
And so working with Saudi right now, it's more of emotion driven,
Okay.
and it's just like the
So,
newest market too.
all right, and you know, in your line of work, you spend a lot of time developing a better understanding for culture and Saudi and everything. So, tell us a little bit of how it started. You know, like
Kind
what,
of that
like
bridge building
yeah,
and
like
east west thing.
yes. How did that start? Like, what was your first endeavors to start all this?
Yeah, so I graduated from Georgetown University
Hmm.
School of Foreign Service, and it comes from a very emotional spot. So first of all, like if you really want to know the history of it,
Okay.
in high school I was so interested in astronomy and I was
Okay.
interested in science and math. And to be honest, I did not have the grades for that. And I had like a telescope, everything, Carl Sagan books,
Hmm.
and I was a super nerd, but it didn't reflect well on my GPA. And so my teachers told me I cannot have a future anything in science or math or
Really?
yeah, with a good university. But I always excelled at in the space of like history, um, social studies, things like that. At that same time, those kind of foundational years of becoming an adult at the end of high school and going into college, my father, we grew up with a very Arab culture, but my father was always away doing business, just an
Hmm.
amazing father, but just kind of a little bit removed.
Okay.
He had more free time in that time, and I'm a daddy's girl when it comes down to it, and I just wanted to understand him more on a
Okay.
personal level, to understand myself. And understanding him is understanding also his context in Saudi, his context in the region, and who we are as Arabs and Muslims and all of that. And so it became this really emotionally driven, excited pursuit to understand myself, which is spiraled into this entire thing.
Hmm.
And so that led me to go to Georgetown University, specialize in international relations with a focus on Middle East and international economics.
Yeah. Well,
I
Georgetown is a
grad
good university,
It
so
is. It's
yeah.
not too bad.
All right.
And so following that, after you graduate, it's usually difficult to find your first job.
Hmm.
And so I was living at home. We live in like the outskirts of Princeton, so very academically inspired.
All right.
Still very invested in kind of understanding myself in the US Middle East space and just Arab culture, and connecting with that. I started writing on kind of more focused on the Gulf because it was an unknown for many people in the US. I started writing on social, like
Yeah.
society, culture, and
Yeah.
economics.
Okay.
I started writing in that space and I got picked up by the Huffington Post. Ariana Huffington herself gave
Oh,
me a
that's interesting.
platform.
All right.
Yeah. And so the thing with that is, so I don't consider myself, I'm not a journalist by any means. And I
Okay.
don't think the stories, unfortunately, that I wanted to say to the Western world, it didn't sell in the media because you have to have a certain pitch and an angle. And to be honest, for the most part, when it comes to the Middle East, at least 10 years ago in the
Hmm.
US, it had to have kind of this sensational or a little bit of a negative angle to get published. And
Yeah.
so Ariana Huffington's blog, Huffington Post, it's, if you get approved, you're a self-publisher, you're not paid, but you can still have the agency to write what you want. And so I was not being paid for 2 years, just solely focused on writing these amazing pieces,
Hmm.
to the point where I was recruited by one of Egypt's largest businessmen, and he's the world's largest collector of Oriental arts,
Okay. Well,
and
what's his name?
Shafiq Gaber.
Okay.
So he has a foundation in Washington, London, and Cairo, and I directed that. Typically, the people who had that post before me were 30 plus. I was like ripe out of college a couple of years. and I led his foundation. And so basically, that was a vehicle. He saw kind of my interest and passion in East West, and it was a vehicle to engage Egypt and the Middle East with the United States
All
on a
right.
people to people level
Mm-hmm.
under the umbrella of culture and arts. And so it was kind of just the start of getting into space of this space of international business, of culture, politics, not in the sense of political work, but who's in DC, policy
Yeah.
making makers. It's important to show them culture aspects so that
Mm-hmm.
they see people as humans, not as just
You know,
kind of
as
talking points and news and things
yeah.
like the sound bites.
Okay. You grew up both, in an Arab and an American household. You're a girl from Jersey.
Yes.
So
Outskirts of Princeton,
the outskirts of
not
Princeton.
typical New Jersey.
All right. So how has that shaped who you are today, Jersey girl?
So, the way that kind of my cross heritage background has shaped me is to just be kind of very neutral in all the things I see in the world and how I navigate that space. My mom is a genealogist, and so she studies history, and she's taken our tests and DNAs of everyone in the family and
Really?
beyond. And if you want yours taken, she'll do that for you and
Oh,
find where you're from.
uh,
But she's German Hungarian, and just kind of her also being a genealogist and like with a deep appreciation for kind of our each of our uniqueness but our similarities,
mm-hmm.
which you find in genealogy a lot. I just grew up really understanding, and through her finds in genealogy of our own ancestors, sometimes because borders change from 100 years ago to 500 years ago, so maybe one time she'll find her dad is German and then originally finds that it's actually French. And so the
Okay.
way that the food that she makes in the house changes, the cuisine, her bias goes around the newest thing that she discovers she is. And so kind of just that mixture in culture and her upbringing us, it kind of made us very diverse in a sense of that. Her family, so she converted to Islam on
Okay.
her own
Mm-hmm.
before she met my father, but her family is Catholic. None of them converted, and obviously my father is Arab Muslim, and so just kind of growing up, it wasn't an interfaith home, it was purely Muslim, but it was engaging in a very tolerant way
Okay.
with another faith, which was the faith in her family and her parents. And so that just, taught me kind of to look at the people themselves and not look at ideas, even though love Islam and I truly believe in it. Just because someone isn't, what I am, doesn't mean that they're bad. And I think so often, sometimes, unfortunately, if you grow up in kind of a home where it's just maybe one ethnicity or one religion, or one experience, it's hard to understand that there's an other that has that there's just an other different than you, and they're okay to exist in their differences. And so I grew up treasuring and appreciating that.
So, like,
Yeah.
when when your father moved to the States,
Yeah.
what did he do to bring a little bit of Saudi back with
Yeah.
him to the
So
U.S.?
so we grew up. So okay, first of all, my father came to the U.S. for university,
Mm-hmm.
where he met my mom.
All right.
Love happened. He fell in love, got married, eloped, and they set up. They decided to live in the U.S. at least the early part of their marriage and raising the kids, and but our intention was always the desire to go back. Like we were never meant to be in the US.
Mm-hmm.
It happens. And
Okay.
so many people assimilate to the US way when they come to the US, and we appreciate and we love it, but we were always yearning and desiring and nostalgic about what was left behind, which was
Yeah.
like Saudi and all of the heritage that comes with it. And so like in terms of how that impacted our upbringing and my father, like I mean anywhere from we like in a white picket fence neighborhood, outskirts of Princeton, imagine.
Mm-hmm.
We imported truckloads of sand from like one of the beaches, and about 1/4 of our backyard was covered in sand completely,
Okay.
which was the worst idea because a
Seems
lot of
fun.
it was fun, but a lot of animals like just would just make their ways into like it just became a disaster because
Became a chore.
yeah, and you shouldn't put sand on top of grass. It just there was mold. It was just a bad experiment. But there was that. We had livestock in the backyard,
Okay.
like sheep, chickens,
All right.
all of
I mean, I
that.
had chickens in my house growing up. I had
Right?
all sorts of animals, but I
It's
remember
like it's a
chicken and
must.
yeah.
In Texas, right? Or
Nah,
in
in
Portland.
actually in Riyadh
Okay, in
is where I
Riyadh.
had
Okay.
the
Okay.
chickens
So
and ducks and all that stuff.
we had ducks too.
Yeah.
I totally forgot about that. So chickens, ducks, sheep, everything. And to be honest, like we didn't know like the law if you can have it or not. We knew that no one else had it, but the neighbors like reported us to the police. Like it was
Oh my
no
God.
big thing, but they were just like cuz the chickens, some of them were roosters, they'd wake up people at 4 a.m. and it was not a farm area.
Okay.
And so the police told us like you need to get rid of these animals and but like we lived in Princeton in a very Arab way. Even my jaddu, my father's father, Allah yirhamu, like he'd come and visit and like he'd just take his shib off and hunt pigeons. Like he'd just throw it and it would hit it and he would eat the pigeon. Like
Alright.
we just
Okay, so like like he was like a flip flop sniper.
exactly. And
Okay.
he was very articulate and he'd get it every time. And those are some elements of how we existed in this space, but in our own little bubble. And it was so romantic. And it was just kind of that experience of what you're experiencing Riyadh and what you had with your chickens and everything, but just in Princeton. And so I think that further just not just gave me appreciation, but a sense of that is who I am too, even though
Yeah.
I'm kind of far removed in the US. I share many similarities with you still.
So you follow a lot of media outlets in the region, and you're very well versed in what's happening here. Do you follow Arab news?
I do. Of course I do. Sometimes I contribute to Arab news. I will say what sets Arab news apart, because there's several English
Media outlets
for the Arab world.
Mhm.
But I think Arab news, which I've always, from the time I was doing work with Huffington Post, appreciated, and my general outlook on media is that news is not just, whatever sensational story that sells or about war and conflict. It's a reflection of the reality on the grounds. And I think that Arab news in particular does an amazing job showing the culture and society, and not just Saudi, in the region in general. And an outlet like Arab News is very accurate, very research based, and in the deep dives that you guys have, it's very thoughtful, but it's also very hopeful, and hopeful not in an unrealistic way, hopeful in a reflection of the reality that's in Saudi. And I think there's so many I won't mention names, but there's so many outlets in the Middle East and in the world in general that, because I think the world is still stuck on narratives of Middle East being like a place of instability, not civilized,
not
things
civilized,
like that.
place that lacks human
Exactly,
rights,
which isn't the truth. A lot of
these are all
media outlets
stereotypes.
cater to that to just get attention and viewers, whereas I feel like Arab News does not do that. And I think Faisal Abbas, the editor-in-chief, is amazing, and kind of the reforms that he's done with the newspaper. He totally, again, I think it was a great establishment before, but he really put it on the map again.
Okay.
And I do know that, when I contribute in Arab News, people recognize it in the United States now. And so I don't think that was there before.
All right. And so what do you think of let's say, digital platforms that the newspaper started, such as this one?
Digital, it's very cost efficient, which is amazing. And so with that being said, you can put more resources into maybe researchers, into designers into more creatives,
Yeah.
because, now everyone's teleworking. Instead of having everyone in the office, maybe instead of having two people here, like in office, you can have five outside, and you can be more far reaching as well.
All right. So before we wrap up with your interview, and I like your take on that just now.
Thanks.
To answer a question you asked me before we started recording, if I had to give myself a simple title, because I was giving you different
Yes.
roles and
Yeah.
things I've done in life. So before we wrap up, I think I've discovered what my title is. I'm just a storyteller. So
I'm much more beyond that, but
yeah, it's all good. I
yeah.
think we can sit and chat all the time. You're a very fascinating person with an interesting profile, and I'd
Thank
love
you.
to see what you're going to be doing in the future, especially with your latest tourism project.
Thank you. I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, me too, me too. And that's all the time we have for our episode today. And I'd like to thank you again for taking the time to be on the show during your short trip from the United States. I know it's going to be a long travel for you tomorrow.
I sleep well on planes.
Yeah, I
So.
don't sleep at all the time,
Oh,
so
no.
I'm good.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, the pleasure's all mine. And tune in to our show for our next guest. And thank you all for being with us.